Okay, let's just dive right in. We are unpacking a story that's been, simmering for years, but it's really hit a critical point right now. I'm talking about the imminent mass release of the mandated Jeffrey Epstein files.
Exactly. And these aren't just little snippets of testimony or a couple of old court documents. When we say the Epstein files, we mean thousands upon thousands of pages.
Right.
We're talking FBI reports, internal DOJ notes, witness interview transcripts, photos, financial records,
And of course, those infamous flight logs.
and the flight logs, yeah. All of it detailing Jeffrey Epstein's, decades-long sex trafficking and abuse enterprise.
And the reason this whole topic has just exploded back into the headlines here in late 2025, it's not because of a new arrest or some big investigation. It's purely procedural. We are literally inside the most critical mandated 30-day window for this disclosure.
That's right. So our mission today is to be your guides through this mountain of source material, the actual law, the court records, the official statements. We need to figure out what this trove of documents really confirms, why it was kept under wraps for so long by multiple administrations, and, what the real impact will be on the global elite.
Beyond all the predictable partisan fighting.
Way beyond that.
So this is where the legal complexity really starts to meet the political reality. This huge disclosure, it isn't some voluntary act of transparency from the White House. It's being forced by a brand new, very specific piece of legislation.
Now, that catalyst is the Epstein Files Transparency Act. It was signed into law by President Trump on November 19th, 2025. And it's important to remember this was a bipartisan bill. The demand for transparency really did cross the aisle.
And that law, it came with a hard deadline. It mandates the Department of Justice to release, well, pretty much all unclassified documents related to the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell investigations.
And in a searchable, downloadable public format.
Right. And it has to be within 30 days of the signing. So that puts the mass public dump, right around December 19th.
And the scope of what they have to release is incredibly broad. We're looking at FBI reports, those critical witness interview transcripts, flight logs, detailed travel records, immunity deals.
And even internal DOJ communications about how the case was handled over the decades.
Exactly.
But the DOJ isn't just dumping everything out there blind. What kind of limitations were built into this law?
There are three main areas they can redact, and they're important. First, they have to redact all victim personally identifiable information, their PII.
Of course.
Second, they have to redact any material that depicts child sexual abuse, which is, legally and ethically just paramount.
And the third one, this is the one that's caused all the controversy and debate, the provision that lets them withhold information that would jeopardize an active federal investigation or prosecution.
Precisely. And that active investigation clause is a potential loophole big enough to, drive a plane through. But the law's framers saw that coming. And this is the critical legal provision that defines this whole release. The Transparency Act explicitly prohibits the DOJ from withholding information solely based on embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity.
So it's basically a legislative hammer. It's forcing the government to say officially that the reputations of the elite don't legally come before the public's right to know.
Correct. It means the DOJ has to meet a really high bar to justify a redaction. They can't just say, oh, this would make a former president look bad and walk away. They need a verifiable, active criminal probe to use that shield.
Which, immediately raises the question that I think you're probably asking. If this has been an open secret for years, why did it take a specific act of Congress in 2025 to force this? Why didn't Presidents Bush or Obama or Biden just release them earlier?
Well, the barrier wasn't always just political. A lot of the time it was an ironclad legal constraint. The primary shield was the rule of Grand Jury Secrecy, which is Federal Rule 6E. Documents from grand juries are protected.
And the executive branch can't just waive that.
No, they can't just waive this decades-old protection. It literally required an act of Congress to compel the release of those specific records.
So grand jury secrecy tied their hands, even if a president wanted to be transparent. But that active investigation shield we just talked about, that played a role for every administration, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just think about the timeline. During the Bush administration, you had the original investigation protecting the files. Then under the Trump administration, you had the new case, Epstein's 2019 arrest, Maxwell's arrest, that kept them protected.
Right, as part of an active federal prosecution.
Exactly. And even after Maxwell's conviction in 2021, the DOJ under the Biden administration could credibly argue that, other investigations into the network were ongoing. So that shield was always there.
That makes the legal argument for not releasing them pretty solid, even without any malice. But then you layer on top of that the massive political risk.
The political risk was just immense. I mean, the files are politically toxic for everyone. We know from the source material that the names involved span the entire political spectrum. President Trump, former President Bill Clinton, both are referenced in connection with his activities.
So what was the bigger hurdle then? The legal complexity of Rule 60 or just the political fear?
I'd say it was the political fear that sort of deferred to the legal constraint. Any president who decided to unilaterally release something this sensitive would have been instantly accused of something, either weaponizing the files against opponents or, on the other hand, protecting their own allies through redactions or slow-walking it.
So the easiest path was always just political caution. Defer to DOJ policy and let Congress figure it out.
And that's what happened. In the end, it took Congress overriding the standard procedure to force this. It's a really rare, very focused act of legislative transparency. And what's so fascinating is that the law itself confirms that the government felt these standard legal barriers were being used to protect reputations.
Okay, let's shift our focus now from all the speculation and the secrecy to the hard facts, the confirmed, established facts. We need to look at what's already been legally confirmed that completely validates the victim's claims and establishes the true scale of this network.
Without a doubt, the single most damning established fact is the 2021 conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell. A jury found her guilty on 5 federal counts, including conspiracy to commit sex trafficking and sex trafficking of a minor.
So that means this abuse was proven, beyond a reasonable doubt, to be a deliberate, organized criminal conspiracy. It was operating from 1994 to 2004, and it required a dedicated accomplice. This just blows that whole idea of an isolated pervert out of the water.
And it confirms an organized ring. And the court documents, they detail the horrifying structure of this operation. It's what some journalists have called the pyramid of abuse. This wasn't just 2 people.
And this is where the specifics from the source material they stick with you. Testimony confirmed that Epstein and his people set up a system where they paid minor victims to recruit other minor girls. That was the core business model.
A terrible detail.
We know from a detective's testimony that one teenager was told Epstein would pay her more if she brought girls, and specifically, the younger, the better.
It's just horrific, but it establishes the clear sophistication of the scheme. It shows they weren't just, exploiting an opportunity. They were systematically building a pipeline of victims.
And we also have confirmed elite accountability that goes beyond just Epstein and Maxwell. It demonstrates the breadth of the network that enabled him.
You can point directly to Prince Andrew. He settled that civil lawsuit from Virginia Jeffrey in 2022, which led to him being stripped of all his military titles and royal duties. That settlement, while it's not a criminal conviction, was a public acknowledgement of the validity of the victim's claims.
And the institutional side is so crucial, too. The lawsuits against JPMorgan Chase. They established that the bank kept Epstein as a client for years, long after their own compliance officers were flagging suspicious activity. It suggests a willful blindness.
Or just an institutional willingness to look the other way because of his wealth. It's the legal foundation for that whole elite immunity argument. These wealthy institutions chose profit over clear legal and ethical warnings.
And you have the notorious flight logs. I mean, they're a factual, non-disputed record of who was around him.
The logs are vital because they confirm association. They just disprove any blanket denials. They show Bill Clinton took at least 17 flights on Epstein's jet. Donald Trump took at least 7. Now, the logs don't prove criminal activity by them, but they factually place them right in Epstein's social orbit.
So the point of the files isn't just to prove Epstein was a criminal. That's been established. It's about the scale of the operation and the extent of the powerful social network that let him operate so brazenly for so long with no consequences.
Which brings us to right now. And we have to talk about the officials who are tasked with managing this explosive December 19th disclosure. Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel. Critics have really seen them as gatekeepers, managing the flow of information rather than facilitating it.
And the main way they're allegedly doing this revolves around that loophole we discussed, that active investigation clause.
Yes, and critics are watching very closely, especially after some shifts in DOJ statements. For example, back in February 2025, Bondi suggested an incriminating client list was available to her, but then she formally reversed course by July. She announced the DOJ had found no incriminating client list.
A lot of people saw that as an attempt to get ahead of the Transparency Act before it could even take effect.
And then came the really highly criticized tactic right before the December deadline. Bondi announced a new investigation into prominent Democrats, allegedly Bill Clinton and Reid Hoffman.
And critics immediately said this was just a calculated procedural move.
Right. By declaring a new active probe into specific people, the DOJ can then legally use the active investigation clause of the new act, which lets them redact or withhold documents about those individuals, basically shielding them from the immediate public release.
Meanwhile, FBI Director Patel, he's been defending their handling by citing the original sin of that 2006 non-prosecution agreement. He claims it limits what the Bureau can release today.
But his most controversial testimony, I think, came in September 2025. He explicitly narrowed the whole scope of the investigation. He claimed there is no credible information that suggests Epstein trafficked women to anyone other than himself. That is a very specific, very narrow framing that critics say lets the FBI easily filter out names of associates. They can just claim they aren't relevant to that core trafficking charge.
And all these actions have just fueled speculation from lawmakers about scrubbing the files. Reports came out that Bondi and Patel ordered this massive, intensive review of the files. I think it was nearly 1,000 FBI personnel working around the clock.
It creates the appearance, whether it's true or not, that there were efforts to soften the impact of the files before the release. And this was highlighted during those hearings about politically sensitive names, where Patel did that highly evasive alphabet exchange, refusing to confirm if he told President Trump his name was in the files. That led lawmakers to openly ask if political allies were being shielded.
So, regardless of the intent here, all this maneuvering has put a huge spotlight on that legal loophole. The question is, when these files finally drop, what are the real long-term ramifications?
I think the single most positive consequence, and it often gets lost in all the political drama, is the validation and closure for victims. This public disclosure is a massive victory for the survivors. It provides concrete evidence that will, without a doubt, fuel more civil lawsuits against the institutions, the banks, the firms, the individuals that enabled Epstein's crimes.
And this permanently shifts the public debate. We move beyond just arguing about who Epstein knew, and we get onto the systemic problem of elite immunity, how powerful people protect each other.
The immediate fallout, though, will be intense political conflict. Since you have figures from both parties referenced, the core debate is going to quickly shift to the context of their association. Specifically, who kept associating with Epstein after his 2008 conviction? That's the ethical line in the sand.
And this accountability isn't just for politics. The source material really suggests a reckoning is coming for the corporate and academic worlds. Just associating with Epstein, even if it wasn't criminal, has already been shown to be a career-ending offense.
Absolutely. The release of emails detailing ties, even seemingly minor ones, has historically led to immediate professional collapse. I mean, look at Larry Summers stepping down from boards after his ties were detailed. We should expect more high-profile resignations across finance, tech, media, universities as that public pressure just mounts.
So the fallout is guaranteed to be chaotic. But the long-term result is going to be a permanent reevaluation of the standards of conduct we expect from the global elite. It took this rare legislative override to force this process, which confirms that the biggest obstacles weren't just legal precedents, but calculated political and reputational risk.
The significance is immense because it took Congress overriding standard DOJ procedure to get us here. It just shows how profoundly effective that shield of political sensitivity has been at keeping secrets.
And that's the ultimate thought we want to leave you with today. The Epstein Files Transparency Act explicitly prevents the files from being withheld for reasons of embarrassment, but it took an act of Congress to enforce that. What does it truly say about the structure of elite power in the 21st century that embarrassment requires a legislative mandate to ensure it doesn't outweigh accountability? And what other secrets are still being protected just because of political sensitivity?